Every September, just over the mountains from here in Chamonix in France, takes place one of the greatest races in the world. It is called the Mont Blanc Ultramarathon, and it's an amazing race that circumnavigates Mont Blanc, passes through 3 countries, over mountain passes and alpine terrain. It's over 100 miles and takes more than 24 hours even for the greatest of athletes to complete. As a result, you end up running through the night, and so very often you can only see just what's in front of you and perhaps the lights of the head torches of the runners ahead of you. And then about every 10 kilometers, there's a feeding station where people will provide food and water for you and will cheer you on to encourage you in your run. It's an amazing achievement. Anyone here done it? Anyone up for that? I was thinking I might enter. Now, amazing as that is, it's also really interesting that the Bible describes the life of faith in terms that are not unlike that. It paints a picture of an endurance race. And it says in our reading tonight, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." To be a Christian is to be an endurance athlete. So if you take nothing else from this evening's sermon, remember this. Faith is this amazing adventure that we must set out on, but it requires dedication and stamina. There might be days when you feel really very tired because you've been running a long way and you need to keep going even when it's hard. And sometimes it feels like you're running in the dark and you can only see just what's in front of you. But from time to time, you will find these gatherings of supporters who will cheer you on and encourage you in your race. You are called to be endurance athletes of faith. And this passage in Hebrews 2 is a really lovely one, and it's a real encouragement. And it's very interesting because it's connected to all of the stuff that we've been learning in Genesis. And the reason I say that is if you see the very first word in the reading, it's therefore. And it's a reference to the chapter that's just finished. So chapter 11 of Hebrews is this amazing list of all of these kind of heroes of faith. From Abel to Abraham, from Jacob to Joseph. And it's the stories that we've been studying and learning about over the last few months in the book of Genesis. And then the next chapter begins, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. And so you see what it is a reference to all of those who have gone before. That those stories in Genesis and throughout the Old Testament are not just old stories to teach us and to encourage us, but they are people who are old friends who are now cheering you on, who are saying, come on, you can do this. Learn from us, be inspired by our example, don't make the mistakes that we made. The eyes of heaven are on you and on this moment, cheering you on and saying, keep going, even when it is hard. So run the race. Verse 1 says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. There are so many things we can end up running after in life. So many things that we think that we need to chase, whether that's wealth or success or possessions or fame. But the wisdom of those who have gone before is that there is only one thing that it is really worth chasing. There is only one thing that really matters and ultimately leads to joy. So like these heroes who have gone before, we set out in pursuit of Christ. We choose to follow the way of Jesus, who says, come, follow me. And some of you have been running this race for a really long time. That might be why you're feeling tired sometimes. But there is real wisdom there. that experience of following Jesus year after year means that there's much to be learned. And we should be learning from one another. We should be asking one another, how is the journey? How is the race? How can I do this better? What can sustain me? But also here, in the book of Hebrews, there's some good training advice. And I would like to share that with you this evening. So the first is this: travel light. I don't know if you've seen like modern mountaineering gear, but it's amazing now because the technology means that it can be really very lightweight and incredibly strong. Much of my gear is still quite old-fashioned and heavy, so I find myself walking with this big rucksack and I see people whizzing past me, not just because they're fitter than me, but because their gear is lighter as well. Traveling light is really very important, especially if you're going to travel a long way. And I feel like in the same way in our lives and in our lives of faith, we often find ourselves carrying baggage. And that baggage slows us down and weighs us down. So verse 1 says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Two things: throw off everything that hinders. You see people carrying these burdens and you wish that they could let them go. Genesis tells all these stories of people who had to let go of those things which they thought were so important, the things which offered them, they thought, comfort and security. But in order to travel, in order to seek a better life and a better country, they had to leave them behind. What is it that you are dragging along with you that you need to let go of? What does it look like for you to travel light? What is it that you think you can't do without, that you actually need to trust God with, because he's good and he loves you and he will provide? And then I think there's this other kind of baggage that we carry, and it's what you might describe as emotional baggage. It's the things that we get tied up in, the things that weigh us down, the old hurts or grievances, the bitterness which can build up, the regrets that we have. What does it look like to trust God with them, to let them go, and to be free to set out on this great journey? Travel light. Throw off everything that hinders. Second part of it was to throw off the sin that so easily entangles. And if you remember in Genesis, one of the striking things about it was the way that people's lives were marred by the terrible choices that they made, rooted in their selfishness or their pride or their envy or their anger or their jealousy. Remember Cain, who was just so overcome by his rage, or Jacob, who had to learn that dishonesty and deceiving people only caused more pain. You know, this stuff that we call sin isn't theoretical. It's the stuff that blights people's lives and blights our world. When we say confession at the start of a service, this is what we're doing. We're throwing off the stuff which holds us back and entangles us. So first piece of advice is to travel light. Second is to set your eyes on the one who shows us the way. How do you keep going when it's hard? Well, determination is good. Courage is good. But all of the advice of the Bible is that it's not just about that. That when things are hard, what we need to do is focus on Jesus. Verse 2 says, fix your eyes on him who is the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. It's Jesus who is the forerunner, the one who has gone before us, the one who knows the course and shows us the way. Set your eyes on him, that wonderful personality, that remarkable life, his incomparable teaching, his presence with you day by day. Set your heart and your eyes upon that, and that will sustain you. In practice, what does that look like? Well, I don't think it's any accident that there are 4 Gospels in the New Testament. There are 4 accounts of Jesus' life. And if you were to just read a little chunk of that, maybe not even a chapter, just a passage of that each day, that would help you to set your eyes on Jesus. It would sustain you and inspire you and nourish you. A little bit of that every day will keep you going. And also, that prayer that Jesus taught. You know, we are so familiar with the Lord's Prayer, and yet when Jesus' disciples asked him to teach them to pray, that's what he taught them. We should pray that every day. That's not all we should pray, but prayer should never be less than that. And it's the most simple and familiar thing, and yet it turns our hearts, it orientates us in the right direction, and it sets our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. So travel light, set your eyes on Jesus, and let him be your guide and your inspiration. As the passage says, consider him who endured such opposition. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So 2 pieces of training wisdom from the book of Hebrews. They couldn't be more simple, and yet if you put that into practice day by day, you will run well, you will run more freely, you will be able to set out on that great adventure, which is the life of faith. The life of faith is an endurance race. It can be very hard. There are moments, as verse 3 says, when you feel like you're growing weary and will lose heart. There are times when it seems dark, when all you can see is just what's in front of you, like those people running through the night. When all you can do is focus on the next step. But you're following in the footsteps of Jesus, who is the light of the world, the light who shines in the darkness. Throw off all that holds you back. Travel light, and day by day choose those things which will sustain you and help you to fix your eyes on Jesus and nourish you along the way. Learn wisdom from other athletes. Learn from one another, from those who've been running this race a long time. Have conversations about what it looks like to keep going, to keep even when it's difficult. And I'm really struck that on Sundays as we gather, that what we're doing here is we're cheering one another on. That's our responsibility here. We should be encouraging one another to keep going, to keep focusing our eyes in the right direction. And that when we're doing that, did you see that we are joining in, not just with the angels in heaven, but with all of those who've gone before, who look at us and say, come on, you can do this. Keep going. We know it's hard. Learn from our example and from our mistake. You can do it. Keep on running. Amen.